So if you're thinking about living overseas in a country like Mexico, which is my choice, you might be thinking about the future or currently, what about Medicare? There are some rules with Medicare covering you overseas, and for the most part, it says, meh, you're not going to get covered. However, there are a number of options if you select correctly when you're choosing your Medicare plan, Medicare Advantage, some supplement plans, things like that. So I am way out of my league here. So I have an expert, which is what I always love to do. So I've got Ron Elledge, and he is an expert on foreign travelers and expats and Medicare. So he is going to walk us through all of our questions and get everything answered. And his contact information is down below if you have additional questions you want to reach out to him. So let's go right away and meet Ron. Thank you so much, Ron, for being here. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background and kind of how you got into this?
First of all, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it. I always like a chance to educate people on how Medicare works because it's so confusing. I have been in the a Medicare broker in Arizona and New Mexico is where my base of business is for the last 15 or 16 years. But over the last 20 years, my wife and I have been consistent, frequent travelers overseas, all over Europe, Central America, Mexico. We've spent a lot of time in and love it, by the way, and the areas you're talking about. We love. And through that time, I had to figure all of this out and put it all together because I wrote a book called Medicare Made Easy, What Expats, Frequent Travelers, and You Need to Know about 4 years ago. And at that time, there was nothing in writing that had anything to do with how to use Medicare overseas. If you asked somebody, the answer was, it doesn't work. It stops at the borders.
And that was the answer that I would have given people just even a month ago until I, started having actually some people in the comments of a video started talking about this. And that's when I found Ron, I think, through the International Living. This is one of those things where you look on the internet and people who think they know stuff might be giving answers and then they learn. That's why you're here today, Ron, is to share.
Yeah,
so
there's actually two places to get bad information on it. Number one is to call Medicare itself. They're getting better, but most of them had no idea how it works overseas. And another is to just go on the internet and get 400 answers for every question you ask.
Yeah.
However, you would have been right and wrong because if you have Medicare Part A and Part B, which are original Medicare, it stops at the border. There's coverage for three very minor areas out of the country. However, if you add either a supplement plan or an advantage plan to that, both of them have different levels of coverage for when you travel out of the United States. And that's what we really major on is figuring out how to make those work because they have different rules and regulations for wherever you are.
Okay, well, let's start with, I guess, where it starts then is the first divergence, the first choice point seems to be supplement versus advantage. So pretty much we've accepted that, straight Medicare, if you want to get coverage, some kind of coverage overseas, and you could always, if you're living close to a border, close to an airport, you could come back to the United States for your Medicare coverage, I guess, if you just had straight Medicare. But let's make the assumption that you want some kind of coverage in Mexico. So supplement versus advantage. What's the difference there?
Well, let me set that up with this point first, is you never want just original Medicare A and B. And the reason for that is it's an 80-20 program. I have seen through COVID, I have seen many people go over $1 million in hospital bills. If you're on straight Medicare A and B, if you get $1 million, you're on the line for 200,000 of it. Mm-hmm. So because it only pays 80% of it. That's why we do either the supplement or the advantage plan to kick in and cover that extra 20%. Because right now, one of the major bankruptcies in the United States is still caused by medical, and a lot of it is people that are only on A and B Medicare. It's very dangerous. You have to be on something besides that. Mm-hmm. So let's look at the two of them. Both of them work in the United States, but a little bit differently. First of all, the supplement plan, the major differences in the two of them is the supplement plan does not have doctor groups. So you can go anywhere in the United States and you can see any doctor you want to see in the United States if you have a supplement plan, as long as they take Medicare, and it'll cover you. With an Advantage plan, they have groups of doctors. It used to be that they were only county-wide groups, but now many of them are nationwide. They'll allow you to go to any of their doctors anywhere in the United States that they have coverage. So those are the major differences. And then the fact that with the supplement plan, you pay a fairly substantial premium up front, but then you have very little, if any, copays on the back end. The Advantage plan, in many of the areas in the United States, you pay zero premium for the Advantage plan, but then you've got small copays. Very seldom do you ever have a copay to go to your primary care doctor. That's usually zero, or any time that you're going in for anything that is coverage that you have to have. But if you're looking at going to specialists, hospitalization, all of the different things, there's going to be a copay for it, and so you manage those copays. Now, until about 4 or 5 years ago, that could add up pretty extensively. But then Medicare came out and they said you had to put a maximum yearly limit on the amount that an individual is exposed to. And now you can get Advantage plans where the maximum that you'll pay out of pocket is less than the premium you pay for the supplement. So they've made a lot of changes to it. It's become very popular, and they have become very good. Still, the one thing is you have to have doctors that are in network. They can't be out of network for many of them, or you pay a higher price. If it's a PPO, you can go out of network, but you're going to pay quite a bit more money, usually 40 or 50% of the excess cost. So the two of them, those are the basic differences.
Oh.
But then when we come to travel, go ahead. You had a question.
I was going to ask, yeah, so why would someone, it seems like we're going to talk mostly about Advantage plans in this video, but why would someone choose a supplement plan over an Advantage plan?
I guess there's two reasons. One of them is fear. The supplement plan is the original plan. It's been out there for forever. And the idea that you may decide that you want a doctor that you can't go to. Mm-hmm. Or Mayo. Mayo does not take any Advantage plans, but it will take a supplement plan. You just have to pay a 15% excess. Mm-hmm. But so that's really the major reason that somebody would choose one over the other. The thing we run into, though, with most of them, as you age, the premiums go up to where when you get over 70, 75, a lot of them are running $300-400 a month. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of premium for somebody, because realize that goes on top of your Part B premium. Mm-hmm. The Part B premium is down to $164.90 a month. Mm-hmm. Anybody that is on Part B, they pay that, or if they have a very high income, they may have to pay even more than that because they're a high income earner. Now that 164 is going to be there whether you choose an Advantage plan or a supplement plan. Mm-hmm. So then you add your supplement on top of that, or your Advantage plan, and your Advantage plan is usually a zero premium throughout the United States. May go up to $49 a month. Mm-hmm. Where a supplement plan will probably start at about 130 to 150, depending on where you are in the United States. Mm-hmm. There's some areas you can't get them for less than $200. Mm-hmm. But then you also have to add a drug plan to that for another $20 or more. Where with an Advantage plan, that zero premium covers your drugs also. So you've got full coverage under that, and it's all managed in one place. That's one of the reasons a lot of people like it, is it's so easy to manage them that way.
Okay, so supplement plan is pretty flexible in terms of you could, if you're traveling across the United States, you can find a doctor just about anywhere that takes the Medicare, but seems like it's more out of pocket up front. Is that correct?
Well, it's got a premium to it that's out of pocket up front. Now, with the Medicare Advantage plans, you do need to realize you can go anywhere in the United States, and you can always go to either urgent care or emergency, and you're going to pay if it's urgent care, you're probably going to pay $40 or $50 to go if you're in Timbuktu, and if you're going to an emergency, it's going to be somewhere between $90 and $120 copay. And, if you have scans and everything while you're in the emergency, that's all covered under that copay. If you check into the hospital for the night, that goes towards the room. So you can see a doctor anywhere in the United States when you're traveling. In fact, anywhere in the world on an Advantage plan. You just can't pick the doctor.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you're visiting your kids, they can't say, let's go to my general practitioner, because you won't be covered.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into then, talking more about those Advantage plans. So maybe you can, and really very specifically about plans. I'm assuming there are some Medicare Advantage plans that don't really cover overseas, but there are some that do, or do they all cover it? How does one choose one of those plans? Because they're all different.
Yeah, they are different, and they change a little bit every year, sometimes quite a bit every year, but at least some, they change their contracts every year. First of all, the main thing is the coverage overseas. That's the difference to me when you're an expat or a frequent traveler, why you would choose an Advantage plan over a supplement plan. If you're on a supplement plan, there's only 6 of them out of the 10 that are there that have any overseas coverage. If you choose one of those 6, it's going to have, all of them are going to have exactly the same. You have a $250, when you're overseas and you have an emergency, you have a $250 deductible every year. But then you pay 20% of everything that is done. So if it's a $100,000 hospital bill in Mexico, which we look at how cheap Mexico is, but boy, I've seen a lot of $100,000 bills down there. Then you're gonna be on the hook for the 20,000 of it.
Yeah.
And they only go for $50,000 maximum in your lifetime. So you're actually going to be on for 10,000 for the first 50 and 50 for the second 50 because it quit covering.
Yeah.
So they're just not a lot of coverage there. An Advantage plan is very different. If you're overseas, you have a copay for emergency and also for urgent care. And overseas, they're usually the same. They can be anywhere from zero. A couple of the carriers have come out in the last 2 years, and they say, if you're in the United States and you go to an emergency out of your area, an emergency, it's $90. If you're anywhere in the world and you go to an emergency out of your area, it's $0. But most of them will charge your standard copay, which is going to be $90 to $120. There's no co-insurance on it, so you don't pay any percent above that. And the majority of them are unlimited coverage for your lifetime, so you know that you're covered. Now, here's a caveat, and that is with either one of the programs, you got to realize in most areas overseas, when you are treated, you pay for the treatment up front. And then you submit your bills to your insurance company, and you get reimbursed once you get back. So those are the major differences. Now, with the Advantage plan, you have to really do research into them because there are still Advantage plans that don't have worldwide coverage. And there are some Advantage plans that when you get into the nitty-gritty of it, they have $50,000 coverage limits, but it's per year instead of per life. But still, if you had $100,000 when you're out of the country, it's all going to be in 1 year.
Yeah.
Unless you're lucky and half of it's in December and half of it's in January. But we don't usually plan our hospital stay that way.
That's interesting because there was a gentleman in El Centenario who he was older and he was hit by a car on his bicycle. He ended up passing away, but after maybe 6 or 8 months, having over $100,000 in medical bills. So really, in Mexico, care is so inexpensive. A lot of people get away with no insurance whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because, if you've got something minor that you would go to your general practitioner for, you could probably handle that at your local pharmacy for, probably less than $10 to see a doctor and get taken care of. So, $10 is you're self-insuring. Even if you have something that's a little more serious, I, had a friend who was hospitalized for a week, and that probably cost him about $4,000. So you can pay that out of pocket. That's possible. But,
Yes.
It's those big tragedies that happen very seldomly, but are, could be devastating financially. And to have them say, your $50,000 is your limit, that's overseas. In somewhere like Mexico, it takes a lot to get to a $50,000 limit, but that's when you really want your insurance to help you, because you're now in a point where you've got outrageous medical bills. I mean, now Larry's care probably in the United States, even though it was a little over $100,000 in Mexico, probably would have been millions in the United States. So less expensive, but still not free. So that for the supplement plans to lock you in at 50,000, in my opinion, is not very helpful for people living overseas.
It's dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
It really is.
Okay, so
now there's one other thing that I do need to mention, and that is the two things I didn't say is the limit of your coverage when you're out with either one of the plans. If you're on a supplement plan, you only have any coverage for the first 60 days of every trip out of the United States. So once you've been gone 60 days, then you have no more coverage. Unless you come back, once you're in the United States, then you can go out again. With the Advantage plan, the vast majority of them are 6 months. There are some of them now that are 12 months. You can be out of your area for 12 months at a time. The real caveat is people need to realize that if they're going to keep an Advantage plan and they're going to live overseas, they also still have to maintain an address in the United States. I tell them you need to keep a driver's license. You need that because you need to have residency in the area that your Advantage plan is issued in.
Yeah.
And you have to maintain that. And so that means for some people, they're going to have to be back in the States for a short period of time every 6 months.
It sounds like even in the best of cases, you have to return at least once a year to the United States.
Yes.
And that's pretty typical. I mean, people come back to see their kids. Most people who are living in Mexico that are from the U.S. do return at least once a year. But it's good to know because that means that you have to.
Yeah, you have to manage it right. And you can't have just a P.O. box. You have to actually have, a lot of people use relatives. They go ahead and rent from a relative or whatever, because you don't have to own it. You just have to have residency in an area. And so you do need to keep a resident address in where you're at in order to keep things legitimate.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I really work with people to make sure they understand that. Or they can think they're covered and they go and have a big coverage. And guess what? They find out insurance companies really don't like to pay bills if they don't have to.
Yes, they will find a way around it if they can.
That's probably the big news flash of the whole telecast here.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about choosing an Advantage plan then, because I don't know how many there are out there, but these are private companies, really, and they all have different options. So how does one go about choosing?
In one of my big areas is Maricopa County in Arizona, and last year there was 74 of them available.
Wow. Okay, so it also depends on where you live.
Absolutely. Yep, and they're all different. Yeah, there are still, if you were in the state of Wyoming, there were no Advantage plans until 2 years ago, and now there's one. So it's, one company. I think they have two plans, maybe three this year. So it is. It depends a lot on where you are in the United States. Major areas where there's a lot of seniors have better plans because of the, just
More
better
competition.
They've done better with setting up their contracts with them. Well, here's one of the first things you look at, and that is if you're somebody that already is established with doctors, you want to be sure and research the Advantage plans and make sure that your doctors are in the network of the plan that you're choosing. Otherwise, it may come January 1st and your plan starts for the year and you find out, oh, the doctor I've gone to for 20 years that I love and would never change isn't on my plan, and I'm stuck with it without him. So what am I going to do? And it can be a real hassle. That, by the way, is the biggest complaint against agents, is they fail to they fail to advise people on that fact. But that's something I'm always careful for, is checking doctors and medications, because those two things are the things that you really watch out for.
Okay.
Then the next thing you do is you look at the strength of the plan, and that's called a star rating. And they go 1 through 5, and it rates the strength of the plan. Actually, you get down into the 3 and below, and you're treading on the possibility of having some issues with different areas of your coverage for the next year. You get 3 and over, you're at least in the ballpark where you're going to be fine, because they're very highly regulated by Medicare. But the plan, and then you start looking at, if you have certain chronic issues, how is it covered? If hospitalization is an area that I look at, because they may have different levels of how much it costs you for hospitalization. The maximum out-of-pocket amount, they can go up to $7,500 a year, but many of them are down around $2,200 to $3,400. Why would you choose a $75 when you can get a $2,200 out-of-pocket maximum? And what that means is when you have issues and you have co-payments that add up to the $2,400, that's anything Part A or anything Part B, then once you hit that point, you have no more payments at all. That's the maximum you're going to pay out of pocket. That doesn't include medications, by the way, but it is for everything else.
Yeah, I love this, Ron. Just a quick aside. I love this. This is probably the most straightforward conversation I've had about health insurance. So I love that you're going in and saying, like, this is what that means: out-of-pocket maximums, deductibles, and copay. There's so much mumbo jumbo. So thank you for explaining better than I've heard other folks explain.
You want me to turn around so you can pat my back? Appreciate that. That's what I try to do. Well, one of the things that I look at is, I'm an educator. So when I deal with people, I never charge for a consultation, whether it's telephone, email, whatever, whether they're in the United States. Yesterday I talked to a guy in Turkey, and I talked to another guy over in Asia. So it doesn't matter where they are, or, and one in Florida. I don't charge anything for it. Because what I do is I educate. Because what I want is, when somebody makes a decision on what they're going to do with Medicare, I want it to be an educated decision so that they feel comfortable with it. Because I've found over the years, for seniors like me, for a senior and their health care, feeling comfortable with it and not having anxiety over your coverage is a major portion of it. And so that's what I do, is just educate. So then another thing we look at, of course, is we've got to go into the evidence of coverage. Most people never see that. They only see the scope of benefits. But you go into the evidence of coverage, and that's where you can dig out what the worldwide travel coverage covers, how much it's going to cost you, and how it's handled. And that's something that if you're a traveler, that's something that you've got to be careful that you understand. And so that's another area that we look at very clearly. And there are some that you disqualify because of that. The major carriers are going to be, I say that, most of the major carriers are going to cover it are going to cover it pretty much the same. But you do have to be careful, because I'll tell you, there's one of the major carriers out there where people don't realize it, but they're a franchise around the United States, and many of them don't have any coverage for out of country. And boy, you get into one of those and get overseas, and you made a mistake.
Yeah, and that's a great point when it comes to not getting your information over the internet or from your friends, because you might be living next door in Mexico to someone who lives in Oregon. They're like, hey, my insurance covers me over here and it's, ABC, big national company. And so you're like, oh, well, ABC treated this guy really well, but you're from Washington. And ABC in Washington has different rules. So it seems like this is state by state in terms of how the plans are issued. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they do. In fact, it's even down to the county.
Okay.
In Arizona, if you're in Maricopa or Pinal County, you're going to have amazing coverage. But if you get up into some of the outlying counties, you could have only 3 plans available, and they're going to be 3 times as expensive as anything you get in Maricopa County.
Interesting.
It comes down to when somebody wants me to look at something they say, how will I know? I say, you got to send me your zip code and the name of your county.
Yep.
If you send me just your zip code, you know what? It might span 2 counties, and that still didn't get me.
Yeah.
So I need the zip code, the name of the county, and when we start to get serious, I also need your doctors and medications.
Yeah, and that is so important. Okay, so let's talk about that cost, because dollars and cents, what is someone going to pay? They're going to get a Medicare Advantage plan. What's the range of cost in terms of across the different things, in terms of your copays, your deductibles, your premiums? I guess that's probably the big one. What kind of range are we talking here?
The premium is not as big as you would think on them, because you can you're usually looking at anything from a 0 premium, which the majority of the areas that we're in are going to have 0 premium, to maybe $49 or $69 a month for a premium. But where we really look at then is hospitalization, because hospitalization is usually based on per night for so many nights, and then that covers what they call a copay for your hospitalization. So here's an average one. You go into the hospital and you pay $170 a night for the first 6 nights. And then after that, if you're in there for 90 nights, it was still just the first 6 nights that you pay for.
Okay.
And so there are some areas where there is no copay. And so you go into the hospital and it's 0 to go into the hospital per stay. It doesn't matter how long you're in. There are other areas that a lot of them are $350 a night for 7 nights. So see, there's a big difference in that. Then your doctors are the same way. Almost everywhere, almost every plan, your primary care doctor is a $0 copay per visit. When you go to the specialist, though, it can be anywhere from $20 to $75, depending on where you are and the kind of plan. Outpatient is one of my really look at, and I tell people, don't ever miss looking at what it would cost you to have outpatient surgery. Outpatient surgery nowadays is down to where it's usually anywhere from $100 to $250. That would be the major copay. And you know that I see those every day for $50,000, or every week or so for $50,000 for that 1-day surgery.
Yep.
And you pay $200 or $250 for it. That's not bad.
Yep.
One of the major carriers about 4 years ago, we're going through all of this in one of our trainings, and it pops up that the year before they had been $225. This year, they're 20%. You know what that does to somebody if they've got a $50,000? All of a sudden, they were expecting $250 and it's $10,000.
Yeah.
Now, if they've got a $6,500 or $7,500 maximum out of pocket, that's their payment on it.
Yeah.
And so you've got to watch things, and they can change from year to year. Normally something like that doesn't happen. And I can tell you, my office pulled everybody out of that plan for that year. The next year, guess what? $225. I mean, we weren't the only ones that pulled it out.
Yeah. So someone needs to be watching for you.
A lot of people didn't see that. If they didn't have a broker working for them, and I tell people, a broker is not allowed to charge you anything. That's the crazy thing about it. A Medicare broker, they advise you for free. they do get paid on the back end. If you sign up with XYZ, XYZ pays us a percentage, and it's the same as every carrier pays you exactly the
Oh,
same.
good. Yeah.
So there's not an incentive to put you in one or the other unless you're not contracted with the other one.
Yep.
And then, so you want to find somebody that's contracted with the majority of the plans in your area.
That is great.
The major plan. But man, somebody to look at it for you every year instead of you having to search all those plans. And what if you missed that and you went in January for an operation and you're thinking, wow, last year 225, this year 7,500.
Yep. Yeah.
That's not a happy camper.
Yep. That is huge. So let's go back to overseas. So we've made our decision now. Claims. So I think you said that you usually, I'm not sure if you said it before or after we pushed record, but you have to pay out of pocket and then you get reimbursed. My friend, a friend of mine, was $800 a night to stay in a hospital, and they wanted his credit card every night. If he was going to stay another day, he had to put it on his credit card. Most of this is reimbursement afterwards. Is that correct?
If you're on a Medicare Advantage plan, then anything that would be a Medicare covered event. Now, if you went into the hospital in Mexico and what you were paying the $900 a night for was for cosmetic surgery, then you're going to eat it because it's not covered under Medicare. But anything that's medical necessary, then that's going to be under your copay. So when you get back, you're going to either pay $250 and 20% of everything if you were within the first 60 days of being out of the country and you had a supplement plan, or if you're within the first 6 months or year, whichever kind of Advantage plan you have, you're going to pay either the 90, let's say 90 to 120, possibly zero depending on the plan. You're going to submit it and they're going to pay you. And they're going to go ahead and reimburse you for it. And that's not unusual. Now, you get over some places over in Europe and you find a different situation, and that is they won't even take credit cards. And so then you're really stuck. I have an answer for that, but you're really stuck if you don't have the answer.
Okay.
That's a little teaser, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. We're gonna like make sure people contact you for that answer.
No, we'll get to that in just a moment.
Oh yeah, good. We cover that. Perfect. So one of the videos that I have, I'll probably have recorded it by the time this video goes live, and that is, I think it's called Lakeside Medical Group out of Chapala, Mexico. So I'm recording this before I head there, but I'll be heading there. And they've got a different deal going on where it sounds like they will take your Medicare Advantage or even your private insurance, and then they operate like a HMO in Mexico. What do you know about those guys?
They're actually a group that it's out of Chapala. That's where their main hospital is. But they have groups of doctors in 5 of the major cities for expats, like Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan and different ones. They've got hospitals or at least clinics there, and then they're tied up with doctors. And they take the majority of Advantage plans. They used to work with supplements too, but they don't anymore because it just didn't work for them. But they work with the Advantage plans, and you sign up with them also, and then they have a schedule of payments that you'll be looking at, and it's very inexpensive. And they are able to charge your Medicare for the vast majority of the things that are on their books. You still got to look at it because they work it very well, but it might not always be your Medicare that's paying it. It might be their own, but who cares as long as it's paid. But yeah, they're a fairly strong group, and a lot of folks are signing up with them and getting involved with them. And I think they've pioneered something in Mexico that I would like to see happen around the world. And that is for carriers to finally realize it's a lot cheaper to treat somebody, to pay their bills out of the country than bring them back and treat them in a United States hospital. And whether that'll catch on, I doubt it, because there's a lot of government involved.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. That urgent versus important, I guess. So it sounds like, say you get something, cancer is a good one because it's something that you can probably wait at least a couple days to get your cancer treatment versus like you're in an accident and you're bleeding. With Lakeside Medical Group, they cover you all in Mexico. Is that?
You have to check with them on
Okay.
that.
We'll check with them.
They have areas that they do, and they have things that they can't do.
Okay. But okay. So,
I've got an answer for that for people anywhere in the world if they're traveling, if they're living, whatever.
yeah. So let's look
And that
outside
is-
Lakeside Medical Group. You got an Advantage plan, any of the, however many, and your doctor, your local doctor who you went to and you paid $90, they say, hate to tell you this, but you've got some form of cancer.
Yeah.
What do you do next?
Now, when you went to that local doctor, realize because you're traveling, you went to him urgently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, what isn't urgent? I got a sore throat in the morning, and if I've got a really sore throat, that's urgent to me to get it treated.
Yes.
And so almost anything, and that's what Lakeside has found, is they can bill almost anything under urgent and emergency. Mm-hmm. And so they've found they've got a great program going there. But for the individual, let's say you were living in Mexico, but you were in France, mm-hmm. and you've got Medicare. Here's the thing that I tell people is there is a combination of coverages that are very inexpensive that can make all the difference to you. In fact, it can actually set you to the point that you can go anywhere in the world and be covered with just your Medicare. Mm-hmm. And that is, you get the right Advantage plan, and then you add to that the correct evacuation and transportation plan. Now, I don't know if you know how those work, but you pay a premium every month for one of those. And then if you have an urgent need, if you have a problem in a country anywhere in the world and you need treatment, continued treatment, they fly you back to your local area so you can go to your hospital and you can be treated in your hospital. So what we find with Medicare is when you go into the hospital overseas, let's say you did have that accident and you go in overseas, well, the emergency may include an operation, it may include a night stay, it may include a lot of things that are under the emergency. However, then if they say you're going to have to convalesce in the hospital for another month, that becomes your dollar. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to end up having to pay for that because that's not going to be covered under your Medicare. So while you were in there for the emergency, contact is made with your evacuation, and the evacuation is aware of what's going on, and they're ready that when you get released from emergency, they pick you up and they fly you back to your home hospital, and you're still on Medicare. Mm-hmm. Now, here's the neat thing about that. Is if you get the right plan, the one I use has $60,000 cash advance to get out of the country. So if I've got an issue and I have to pay up front, they will front me $60,000. That is just a cash advance, and when I get back to the States, I have to pay it back. But it gets me back to the States so I can rearrange my finances or, sell my mother's home or whatever you have to do. It's better than being over there and them saying you got to pay us cash for all $50,000 before you get out of it. And then how many days are you still racking up more of it while your friends or relatives in the States are trying to put everything together to get you the money?
Yeah. So what you're talking about there is essentially the hospital wants to get paid in Mexico before you get to leave the country. So so you have to pay the full bill up front because Medicare Advantage is going to reimburse you. They're not going to reimburse the hospital. So yeah, sometimes it is important to have a big chunk of cash available to get that move made. Otherwise, you're going to keep racking up bills. So complicated stuff.
Let me just share with you. The people look at that and they think, my God, that's got to be expensive. It's like anywhere from $35 to $50 a month for a family for the evacuation insurance. Mm-hmm. It's not expensive, and it covers you in the United States also for ambulance and air ambulance, and that's another place in the United States people get in trouble with Medicare. Can I just give you one rule to watch out for before we close anything down? And that is if you're in an auto wreck out on the highway, and you're out next to some little community or something, and they have to go ahead and ambulance you in there, and you get in there that morning and they say, we can't treat you, we've got to fly you to Phoenix. I use that because I've seen this happen in Arizona many times. We're going to fly you to Phoenix. They load you up in the aircraft and they fly you to Phoenix. Well, coming into town was probably $800 to $1,200. Mm-hmm. Going from there to Phoenix was probably $18,000 to $25,000. Mm-hmm. The problem is with Medicare, they say we'll pay for the first ambulance ride per day. Mm-hmm. So that means Medicare covers the ambulance ride to the hospital, and you cover the ambulance ride back to Phoenix.
Yeah.
Your evacuation plan comes in, and they pay that with no copay.
I see. Yep. Yeah.
It's just I've got it on my kids. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got my kids are both married, have families, and grown-ups, but I didn't want them to make the mistake of not understanding how important it is.
Yep.
So I've got it on all of my family because it's so cheap next to what it gives you. So inexpensive for the coverage it gives. And if you're a traveler and you're on Medicare, you have to have it.
And I've got a video, I think, up here with someone talking about specifically about that issue of evacuation plans. So we need to wrap up. So I want people to know how they can get in touch with you and also what you can provide for them.
Okay, what I'll provide is consultation. Mm-hmm. By that, I mean, I'll help them research. I'll help them make sure that they understand what's available in their area, what would fit for them, so that they can make a great decision. If it's not my state, then I have a partner that is licensed in every state. And so we can just give them a link and they can go ahead and get signed up if they like, or they could get directly in contact with Tim and he can continue to go through it and just really get all the nuts and bolts to them, because I can't go into the real nuts and bolts of a plan with somebody when they're not in a state that I'm licensed in, but Tim can.
Yep.
And so we work it together all the time that way. So if they come to me, I can take it from A to Z, and they'll feel comfortable because, really, I am a nice guy.
Yes, I would agree with that. So, and your contact information is going to be down below. I guess before we leave, is there anything else that we need to talk about? You had one thing that you were going to share with us that was a surprise. What was that?
Oh, that was the idea of how you cover that $60,000 that you get stuck with in the hospital, and they say you can't leave until you pay it, and that's where the right evacuation comes in, and they pay that for you.
Okay,
and that's a really a cool situation, and I will tell you, there's very few of them that have that available. So you got to be in the right plan.
Yes, I see. So not only the transportation back, but the ability to pay off the hospital to get you out of it. So
yeah, that's, for me, if I was overseas traveling and I got hit for 50, 60,000, I'd be in the hospital for a while trying to rearrange my stuff in the United States to figure out where I'm going to pull it from and how I'm going to pay it. I don't have that much cash anywhere.
Yeah. Well, Ron, this has been incredibly helpful for me to really understand this. And I'm sure for everyone who's watching this, this has been really, really educational. And folks can reach out to you for more information, or your partners. Once again, thank you so much. And those of you watching, I don't want you to leave questions down below in the comments section, because I'm not going to have the answers, and Ron's not going to be watching the comment section on this video forever. So be sure to go ahead and, look at the links down below to get in contact with Ron. But do tell me what you thought of this video, and if you have any other things that you can share with other folks. And I've got some more videos. I've got the medical evacuation video up here and other videos about life in Mexico. So thanks for watching. Hasta luego.